This is for all you sophisticated ladies out there.
You're back listening to The Hook. My name is Josh Reno, along with the marketing maverick. That's Jason Arsmont. You can always find us online, thehookradio.com. And you ready for the guest?
Let's do it. It's a good one.
Very excited about this because this guy has done so much for Houston, not only in that he played football for the Oilers, but he brought the Dynamo here. Now on the NCAA Regulatory Committee, we have our guest on the phone. It's Oliver Luck. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Happy to be on.
Well, you know, I think unless you've been living under a rock, in some sense you probably know who Oliver Luck is. But Oliver, maybe I'd love to hear from your perspective. What are the highlights of your career as you would describe it?
Well, that's a great question. I'm not sure that there are any highlights in particular, but I've been fortunate to find myself in a number of different situations, with different interesting jobs. The first one really, quite honestly, right out of college, being a quarterback for the old Houston Oilers. It's every kid's dream to play in the NFL. At least every kid's dream who plays high school football or college football. So that was a fun experience. That was really my first exposure to Houston, and I've been fortunate to be a part of the stadium construction in Houston with Minute Maid Park and Reliant/Energy Field, and of course the Rockets building, and then being able to run the Dynamo. So I've been very fortunate to have lots of connections over the years to Houston, and I guess all of those are somewhat memorable. It's hard to pick one that would be particularly interesting. I suppose if I had to do it, it would be, back as an Oiler, because that's just such a unique opportunity to play professional sports.
So while you were the Oiler quarterback and you were thinking about what the future held for you, how did you have that in your mind? Okay, this is not going to last forever. I'm not going to be 70.
Did it? Does that run through your mind? Yeah. Were you thinking back then, hey, this is going to last forever, or were you trying to set up yourself professionally?
No, I think anybody that plays in the NFL realizes that, amongst other things, NFL can stand for not for long. Right. It's a very tough, business. It's even harder now. I watch it now with my son playing. It's a physical business. Your careers are short. I was a backup quarterback. I also was very realistic about my skill set. I played behind Warren Moon. Pretty obvious to see Warren was a much better player than I was. So, I think a lot of players, myself included, you get in for a couple of years and you realize how challenging it is. So you start to think about, what do I want to do, after football. In some cases that happens, quickly. Other cases, some guys play 10, 12, 15 years. But I always believe in education, and so I decided I'd go to law school and, continue my education, and that would open up some doors, which it absolutely did. So I don't think I'm unique at all in that sense. Most guys really realize once they're in it for a couple of years of how tough it really is, right, and how risky it is in terms of, physical ailments, right? Knee, shoulder, concussion, you name it. It's hard to stay healthy and have a long career in that sport. So, like many guys, I began to think very quickly, okay, what can I do to take advantage of, the free time that I have and make good use of it.
So it was going back to law school for you then? I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, no. So I spent my off seasons going to law school, both at South Texas College of Law during the season, and then up in Austin at the University of Texas, during the spring semester. So, I was one of those guys that used the time, I think, pretty wisely. A lot of guys would, go play golf. Some guys went back and finished their undergraduate degree. Some guys were working on master's degrees, but some guys were working, because they really weren't paying us that much money way back in the early 80s, but
not like it is today, is it?
No, it's changed a lot. It really has, and I think it's changed for the better, quite honestly. But that's what guys did. In fact, when I was playing for the Oilers, they had a guy on staff who helped find off-season jobs for players.
Wow.
And that wasn't just to make money. It was also to sort of prepare yourself, for a future career, right, stockbroker or whatever. But a lot of guys, quite honestly, needed the money. Salaries back then were $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, and
oh my goodness.
So.
Yeah, he definitely needed something else to rely on. I think one of the kind of the intriguing things about your career is, as I look back on the things you've done, was your time with the Dynamo. How did that come up? How did that kind of evolve for you into the role? And you led the organization as president for, was it 2 or 3 years? How long were you there?
I was there for 5 years. So
5, okay. Wow.
The short story is this. I was running the Harris County Houston Sports Authority, and that is the organization, charged with building, a new football stadium, a new baseball stadium, and a new basketball, / hockey arena. And effectively, we did that, and we sort of took care of the venues, and they're very important, obviously, for pro sports teams. We took care of the venues for the Texans, the rodeo, the Rockets, the Astros, the minor league hockey team at the time, et cetera. The one sport that Houston didn't have at that point was soccer. Right, we had a minor league hockey team, didn't have an NHL team, but had a minor league team. But there was no professional soccer in the city, and this was a city-county entity, the sports authorities. So I convinced my bosses, who were publicly appointed officials. I said, listen, we should make an effort to go find a Major League Soccer franchise. Houston's a very dynamic city. We're very ethnically diverse. We've got lots of Latinos. People like soccer. The Anglos like soccer. African Americans like soccer. Latinos like soccer. Everybody likes soccer. It's the world's game. So I convinced my bosses that it would be worthwhile to sort of make an effort to try to attract a franchise. There were two existing franchises at the time, one in Kansas City and one in San Jose, that were both struggling financially. They couldn't get venues built. And so we talked to both of those franchises. We ended up, attracting the San Jose franchise to move down to Houston. And, that was the old San Jose Earthquake. Of course, we changed the name to the Houston Dynamo, and, the rest is history. But after we brought the franchise down, the owners of the franchise, who were based in Los Angeles, asked me to run the team. So I ran it for 5 years.
Man. Well, listeners, if you're just tuning in, we have our guest Oliver Luck on the phone with us today. We're excited to be talking with him about kind of his legacy of his career that he's led. I mean, so many different things. You wouldn't think from going from football to soccer to now you're at the college level with NCAA. How did that progression into the NCAA take place?
Well, so I was in Houston running the Dynamo, and my alma mater is West Virginia University. It's where I went to college, undergraduate, and where I played football. And I was on their board of trustees. We hired a new president at West Virginia. He then asked me to become the athletic director at the school. We were going through a pretty significant transition. College athletics. This was 2010. College athletics was going through a pretty significant transition. There was also a sort of a big issue out there, college football realignment, that was happening that had a serious effect on us. Long story short, President asked me if I would, consider becoming the athletic director, which I did, and did that for 5 years. I told him I'd give him 4 or 5 years, to try to make a number of changes that we needed to make, within the athletic department, and that worked out very well. So that position, right, in college athletics as an athletic director led me to the position here at the NCAA.
What are your business wins? What do you feel like in business that was your overarching talent that you brought into the business world?
You're absolutely right about needing business skills when you're in the sports business, right? Because the sports business is a business. It's unique, like every other business. It's got its quirks and all that, but you really need to have, fundamental business skills that can help, and even at the NCAA, I'm not responsible for a business unit, right? I'm not selling tickets or selling sponsorships or cutting TV deals like I did when I was with the Dynamo, or the 10 years I worked for the NFL. But I have to be very cognizant, because money is very important, right? And money drives most decisions. So even with what I do now, I need to sort of keep my finger in the business money space, if you will, within athletics. I don't know necessarily what skills are helpful, but I think I'm a pretty analytical person. I like to ask why. I like to ask questions to find out, why people are doing things. Is there a different way to do it? Is there a better way to do it? Is there a more efficient way to do it? As an example, and this is a small thing, but it's money. When I was the AD at West Virginia, we started to sell beer at our home football games.
I'm a fan of that.
And
I think A&M just started that, right?
Anybody who's a beer drinker is a fan of that. But and a lot of schools are starting to do that. And that was a somewhat controversial thing because most undergraduates at a college are under 21, so they're not of age to drink. Yeah. But you also have a lot of older folks that go to college football games. I mean, the students are actually a small sliver. We did a bunch of research, talked to the local police force. There were a lot of reasons to do it. Long and short, we did it. Took a little bit of heat, but not too much. We did it, and that generates to this day. It's been going on now for about 5 seasons or so. That generates about $600,000-$700,000 a year.
Wow,
in extra revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though we took a little bit of criticism for it, sometimes in business you got to be able to take a little bit of heat, make a decision.
Yeah.
It may not be the most popular decision, but ultimately it's a good financial decision. And now, if you polled the fans of West Virginia University, the Mountaineer football fans who go to games, I would imagine 70% would say, yeah, it's great that we're selling beer. We'd be upset if they took it away, because people go to a game and buy a, $10 Bud Light or whatever. And, they expect that, and so part of it is also knowing what expectations do fans have? How can we better meet those expectations? And being, having a little bit of courage, if you will, to make some of those tough decisions that others may be sort of afraid to make because it will take some heat.
And really in business overall, it's about taking those risks. So you did that, and that was a good payoff in that situation for sure. So, well, we're coming up to the end of this segment, and we got to get into a break. Will you hang out with us for one more segment?
Sure.
Can you do that? All right. Thanks so much. We have Oliver Luck on the line talking to us, and we'll get into some emails in just a few minutes. Jason Arsmont there. I'm Josh Reno. You're listening to The Hook.
Something about a truck in a farmer's field.
You're listening to The Hook, a business, marketing, branding show, and now we're talking a little bit of sports here and there because we have Oliver Luck on the line. Jason
kind of hard
Arsmont.
not to, right?
Yeah. It's a little bit difficult to not get into it. And whenever we announced that you were going to be on the show, we got a lot of questions for you, Oliver. If you'll answer maybe a few of these for us.
Yeah,
sure.
And obviously these have a little bit more to do with kind of relevant things that are going on with NCAA. I think a lot of people are asking about the Ed O'Bannon case and how that's playing out. And, I'd love to hear your take on how you think that may or may not end up playing out.
Well, that case right now, from a legal perspective, is at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Ninth Circuit issued a decision about 3 or 4 months ago. That decision is under review, by the full appellate court. So the legal case hasn't fully played out. It may or may not end up at the Supreme Court. But I will say this: the O'Bannon decision has really forced the NCAA, the membership, right? We got 351 Division I schools, another 400 or something Division II schools, Division III as well. It's forced the NCAA to really take a hard look at some of the things that we're doing, and it's resulted in a lot of what I would call positives for student athletes. So, for example, just starting this past year, back in September, schools, at least the big schools, are paying the full cost of attendance. That's a stipend. And that stipend is worth $3,000, $4,000, in some cases $5,000 for students. So they're getting that cash in hand. It's not a salary, it's a stipend that schools are providing to kids. So that really was generated, from the concern that people had that student athletes, as evidenced by the O'Bannon suit, felt like they were sort of getting the short end of the stick. So the O'Bannon case has really prompted, I think, some very positive, proactive steps that the NCAA, the membership, has taken. We've gotten rid of all the restrictions on nutrition, on food, right? So, you can theoretically, you can hang a bag of oats around a kid's neck so that he's constantly
grow.
fed, right? Yeah, right? Because, these kids work out hard. Think about swimmers and others. They burn, thousands of calories with their workout. Right. So that's helped, better health care, guaranteed scholarships. That's another issue that came out of many of these lawsuits that we said, all right, it's not just a 1-year scholarship that's renewable every year, but it's a 4-year or in some cases 5-year guarantee. So I'd have to get very specific about the O'Bannon lawsuit and where it sits in terms of procedure. But the message I think for folks is that the concern from the membership, about, gosh, maybe we really do need to do more for our student athletes has been heard, and things have been implemented that I think at the end of the day are really, really positive for young people.
Yeah, I always kind of ride on that fence, and it's not my world. I'm not a huge college sports guy, but I see that if an organization is making money due to the efforts in the display or the sportsmanship or the entertainment value that these students are bringing, that seems like there should be something there. But then again, I'm kind of on that other side where I'm like, you should be going there for an education, and this isn't just a mill, but it's a tough one.
And I think most people are probably like you are, sort of on the fence. So, what I would say is this, a scholarship in terms of the academics is absolutely worth it. It's a great opportunity to get a 4 or 5 year degree and, not have any debt, right? Everybody else is walking around with, mountains of student debt. There are other things that we've begun to do, like full cost of attendance, where you should be able to cover all of your costs. A lot of kids are on Pell Grants as well, even though they're on full scholarship. The one step that we're not prepared to take is to put student athletes on a salary.
Right. Okay.
Because that would change the relationship. Right now, it's coach student or professor student, and
they should still be learning, right? I mean, this should still be.
It's about learning. It's about education, taking advantage of that. If kids were employees, we'd have an employer-employee relationship, and I think the vast majority of people, both on campus as well as in the general public, would say, that's not really kind of what college sports should be about.
And then what about
professional sports?
Ex-pros guys coming back to college?
That's right.
I guess it would really potentially flood the market, so to speak, of talent in those in the schools for sure.
Well, if kids were paid, basically, you'd have pretty poorly paid minor league players, right? And there's minor league sports, there's minor league baseball, hockey, the D League basketball. I don't think that's the space that college presidents, who ultimately run the NCAA, I don't think that's the space that college presidents want to be in, quite honestly. In fact, I know it's not.
It also goes back to how many, as far as all the colleges go, how many athletes are out there?
We've got, right now there are about 450,000 student athletes. That's Divisions 1, 2, and 3.
And that's
a lot of people.
Isn't the statistic that less than 1% actually go on to play professionally?
Oh, yeah. I mean, really, at the end of the day, you've got a small group of basketball players, small group of football players, baseball players, hockey, et cetera, but it's less than 1%, right? So, and keep in mind that our economic system, right? When I was at West Virginia as the AD, we make money with football, we make money with basketball, men's basketball. We spend that profit, that excess, we spend that on the volleyball team, the swim team, the track team, the soccer team. None of those other sports make any money, right? So virtually every school is identical in that regard. So, when people say, hey, you're making a lot of money, I saw Alabama on TV, there's 90,000 people. You're right. The Alabama football team makes a lot of money, but Alabama spends that on the gymnastics team and the track team and everything else that doesn't make money, right? So, it's a socialistic system in many respects, but it's a system that has allowed schools to support lots of different sports. So it's not just the football or men's basketball. It's allowed us to comply with Title IX, right, the federal law mandating gender equity. It's allowed us it's given us funds to allow us to do all these great things with women's sports, and we're now, I think, the best in the world in our women's athletes and women's sports.
So one other question that came through from the listeners in getting ready for the show had to do in relation to all the stuff that's going on in Kansas with some of the students being reviewed. I don't know if you can weigh in on any of that stuff or not, Mr. Luck, but there was definitely some interest in a couple emails about how the NCAA would have kind of a higher interest in high school curriculum, but maybe not as much at the college curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, I could speak in some generalities because So what happened was 15, 20 years ago there was a sort of a rash of diploma mill schools, right? Okay. Schools that weren't really schools. They were storefronts or whatever, and that was inappropriate. Our membership was concerned about that. Very often they were, like holding pens almost for basketball players, So there was a big New York Times expose years ago about these diploma mills, and they weren't teaching kids. I mean, So, we began started a group within the NCAA that reviewed high schools because, we were concerned that kids would go to these schools, would be taken advantage of,
right.
weren't receiving a proper high school education, a proper secondary education. So we still do that. And, quite honestly, we have to ask ourselves, do we still want to be in that space? There still are some diploma mills, states shut down high schools all the time for various reasons. But, it's one of those things that we're looking at and asking, do we really want to be in that space? Chuck Diallo, who's the basketball player, student athlete at Kansas,
right.
went to one of those schools that was on a kind of an at-risk list. And that's really the primary reason that it took a while for him to get cleared to play. But I'll be very frank, it's one of those things that we're looking at and trying to decide, does it make sense to be in that space? High schools aren't our members, right? Colleges are members of the NCAA, but not high schools. So we all of a sudden find ourselves regulating a non-member.
Right. Yeah.
That's a question we have to ask ourselves. I'll leave it at that. So it's a very legitimate question.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be a tough one, because if it is truly just kind of a mill, then it's like, well, are these schools kind of playing agents and taking advantage? And then, if they did, then everybody be pissed at NCAA for not taking charge, and making sure these kids are protected. So I definitely see the flip side of that.
Yeah, but some people have said, hey, every state, all right, State Board of Education, authorizes, charters, whatever, recognizes schools. So, if a school is recognized by the state of X, state of Y, state of Z, should be good enough for us, right? So there's a variety of different arguments. We've got to see if it really just makes sense for us, because we're NCAA is not, some huge organization. We're a relatively small shop. Do we have the people? Is that the right space for us to be in? Are we allowed legally to be in that space? Does it offer, is there legal exposure if we're in that space? But we're doing that because the colleges, the universities, our members have said, hey, we don't have the resources to, a school doesn't have the resources in its admissions department to check on 50 schools around the country that might be dodgy, So it's a complicated question, but it's a very complicated issue, but a very fair question from the listener.
Do you feel like the NCAA is marketed and branded the right way? Like, do you have any thoughts on how they do things from that side of things? I know that you're in a totally different area, but if you're looking at it, the organization as a whole, do you feel like it's done the right way?
I think by and large there's a lot of equity in the NCAA brand. When people think NCAA, they do think college sports. They may think that sometimes we're heavy-handed or we do stupid things. And we've done those heavy-handed and stupid things in the past, no question about it. I'm sure we'll do some of those in the future. But by and large, I think people equate the NCAA, with the group that regulates college sports. Nobody likes a regulator, right? You don't like the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. If you're a stockbroker, you don't like the Securities and Exchange Commission, right? Nobody likes a regulator until you need one. You don't like the police force until you need a cop, right? So, any regulating body, and that's exactly what we are. Any regulating body is there to sort of make sure that the rules are followed. But effectively, we pass the rules that our membership wants. So I think most folks generally understand that, but I think, when people think of college athletics, they don't necessarily think of the blue disc, the NCAA blue disc. They think of they think of Alabama football or UConn men's basketball or, Texas soccer or whatever, right? They think of those teams that they really support, where I went to my alma mater, et cetera. And those are typically very positive feelings, right? Because people love to support their college teams.
And don't forget about McNeese State University in Lake Charles.
I won't forget about the Cowboys, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, there you go.
Baby. Man of the people. Love it. I love it. Well, Mr. Luck, I appreciate your time. I know you're busy. I appreciate your time and your transparency and sharing your career with us and some of the things that you've learned and your positions. I know our listeners are just going to be thrilled. I'm already getting emails now from folks. So, again, I thank you so much for carving out some time for us. And, thanks so much.
All the best. Thanks.
And that's a wrap, folks.
That's it. I can't believe that was an amazing interview as far as I'm concerned, because he knew who McNeese was.
Yeah, and the listeners are going to love it. He answered very directly about some things that I think was good. Our listeners can't be unhappy with that. So, man, if you like that one, you guys got to keep tuning in. We're going to continue to bring great guests for you. Next week, we are revisiting our folks with Offshore Magazine and the U of H. They're coming back to talk with us about their online learning center that they've started up.
Don't forget, you can always find the show, even in the back shows, up on our websites. It's thehookradio.com. We'll see you next week. That's Jason Arspont. My name is Josh Reno on The Hook.